Hello and welcome to this very first episode of the Motorsport Files. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for tuning in and listening wherever you are. I'm your host, Drew Bentham.
I'm Garry Phillips, co-host.
Nice to have you on, Garry. Thank you for coming on board as well. This episode is quite rally heavy, and we've also got a really cool feature coming up in part 3. But before we get to that, let's start with F1 news. Garry, what have you got for us?
I think this year is going to be interesting, very interesting, because this year everything changes. The cars are changing, slightly smaller, slightly lighter. The engines have changed, or the powertrain, as it's been referred to a lot more now, with the split of energy being 50-50 between the internal combustion engine and the electrics, and also to throw the third change into all of this is active aero, where the drivers will actually have control of the front and rear wings, and DRS is no longer. So I think a combination of those three changes, and the tyres have changed, they're slightly smaller. There's an awful lot changing there. So I think we're going to have a season where, are we going to have a bronze season where just one team hits that sweet spot right from the get-go? Or are we going to be back to watching porpoising as we had in, I think, 2022?
Well, I think they've gone away from the ground effect, haven't they? That which was causing all the porpoising last year. So hopefully we're not going to have that this year. I was having a look on the McLaren website earlier on, actually, and there's so many different descriptions of the new tech, but theirs was quite straightforward. And according to their website, you've got a boost button now, which basically unlocks the full potential of the engine. Now, I'm taking that to be the ICE engine. It's kind of like activating a turbo, really. So you just get like short-term extra boost to help you pass. That's kind of limited like before. So you can only use it for a certain amount of time, I think. But there are no detection zones where that's concerned, and drivers can basically use it anywhere. Is that your take on that as well?
Yeah, I read up on that. They used to have fuel flow restrictions. They have now gone, and it's now talking about overall energy restrictions. So you were saying, is it from the internal combustion engine? It's a combination of that and the electrics, but there are restrictions on when you can use it and how much it's there for. So that, yes, the drivers will have some sort of turbo boost button. The restrictions on when you can use it and for how long.
I think the boost button is it's part of engine mapping. So it kind of activates the temporary engine map so that you've got more power. On the electrical side, you've got an overtake mode. And this is it's kind of like last year's technology, but they've moved the goalposts around a little bit and are calling it different things, and it works in slightly different ways. But when you boil it down, it's pretty similar. So this overtake mode is another button that they've got, and this is extra electrical energy. Now that they had that last year, and I cannot for the life of me remember what it was called. There was DRS and there was something else, and I cannot remember what that acronym was. How quickly we forget. But that's basically push to pass, if you like. So that is triggered by detection zones like it was last year, like the DRS was last year. But that's electrical energy only. And then you've got active aero, which from what I can work out, it's active aero. So it's both front and rear wings, and how it basically goes around corners. And this is a bit more like DRS. So you've got two modes. You've got straight mode. So the wings open, the front and rear wings will open up a little bit, reducing your drag and allowing you to a little bit of overspeed so that you can make passes. And then you've got your corner mode where it all closes back down again so you can go around corners. To me, that sounds like an updated DRS kind of, but it's also on the front wing as well as the rear now.
I think the other big change is it's driver activated.
It is.
I know the DRS, the drivers had to still press something in the car, but there's quite a few articles out there and people talking about, they've looked at and talked quite openly about automating it. So when you get to a straight or you're doing something or you're within a second, this will just fly open or certainly automate the closing of the wings after the straights.
Yeah, oh, you've got that recharge as well, haven't you? So there's probably going to be quite a lot of lift and coast happening as well, where the drivers are trying to recharge their energy systems before they need it further around the laps.
Yeah, I did read one article, and they were on about when they were forming these regulations, and you can tell why the teams have to be involved, because with 50% of your energy coming from electric, which is basically a battery,
yeah,
I'm thinking, I could charge it up on the over-run braking into the corners. And apparently all the teams that went, hello, what about Monza? Where it's a ridiculous percentage of Monza is with your foot flat out. So I think somebody then had basically pointed out, maybe it's not going to work that well at every circuit, or it could be very circuit specific.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely bang on.
But again, that's going to be the fun of this season, watching all this unfold in front of us.
Figuring it out,
It's going to be fantastic.
I think it is actually, and it's a busy season as well. Another 24 races crammed into the year. The grid itself is also busy. We've got one extra team, but obviously we've got two new boys on the grid, haven't we, this year?
Mm.
What with Audi fully taking over the old Sauber team and Cadillac joining the fray as well. What do you make of that?
So they have got a complete new package there to try and get the head round. Cadillac, brand new team, not taking over anybody, but like Haas, they've started off from scratch, but they are going to be using Ferrari engines for the first, I think it's either 2 or 3 seasons, but they are building a factory somewhere in the States to make their own engines. So the amount of money Cadillac are pumping into this is quite a significant amount. They haven't, like Ford, who have bought into Red Bull.
Isn't Mario Andretti still involved? Because he was going. So Mario Andretti was supposed to be trying to get his own team, and he was going to be coming on board with Cadillac. FIA said no, you're not having it. And then Cadillac have since come in, put their own tender in, and they've managed to basically bring it home and create their own team. But I'm not sure if he's still got any involvement. I wouldn't be surprised if he does, because the amount of experience that man's got is incredible. And I think they'd be daft not to really make use of that. So even if he's not an official member of the team,
he'd be an ambassador. You become an ambassador these days.
Consultant. Yeah.
No, that's far too common. Ambassador, please.
Yeah, he's an absolute legend in the sport. Okay, I'll give you that. Speaking of Cadillac, what do you reckon to the driver lineup then? We've got Checo and
I think the only phrase which springs straight to mind is sensible. I think if they'd gone for 2 young new drivers, I don't think that would have ended well. I don't think it would have helped them develop the cars. And I think going for those 2, they've got 2 very experienced drivers, been to a number of teams and hopefully know what they're doing. I always have the feeling that Perez is always on the brink of having a meltdown if it's not going well, and if it doesn't go well this season, is he going to fall out with himself and fail? Whereas Bottas, I think since he left Mercedes, he just seems to be the most chilled out guy going, and I just think he's getting paid to drive an F1 car, and he's just going to be as happy as Larry.
I mean, I'm not going to say that you're not right, but when I heard the reports on the podcast that Checo has done recently, I did try and have a listen. Unfortunately, I don't speak Spanish, so I couldn't understand a word of it, and I couldn't find a transcript of it anywhere either. But the reports that were coming out he was basically trying to describe what life was like at Red Bull. Almost trying to justify himself and his performance when he was there at the team. And it sounds, basically he was confirming everything that the fans were basically saying, that the car is built around Max, that it was tailored to him. And then you weren't allowed to go faster than him because they didn't like that. They got upset. And if you were too slow, they'd also get upset. So you had this very small little window that you could perform in. And if you didn't, you were out the door, as we've seen, 3, 4, 5 times now with subsequent drivers. So I do feel for him. And I think now he's with Cadillac, I think he's in a completely different work environment. And maybe if they start doing well, I mean, they're not going to win, but I mean, if they're, competitive in the midfield, I think that's a great result for their first year of competition. And I think he'll be all right. He'll be happy enough, don't you think?
I've never. Obviously, I can't drive a Formula One car, and so on that level, he's infinitely better at driving a car than I ever will be. But I have never, ever, he's never really done it.
You've never rated him?
No. The only thing, the thing he will always stick in my mind as, real random fact here, is a lap record holder at Croft.
Checo Perez?
Yep.
Wait a minute.
Yes,
I don't think Checo's ever been around Croft. Has he?
Yes, he has. He did the British Formula 3 or Formula 4 one year, and he holds a lap record at Croft.
I did not know that. I didn't know he did British. I thought he'd come up through the Mexican route into F2. I didn't know he'd done the British F3. That's news.
I'm fairly certain it's. I've got it stuck in my mind. Yeah. If I wasn't using this, I'd be tapping away. I'd be Googling like mad now.
So how do you think they're both going to get on then this year? Where do you think they're going to place? I think they're going to do...
What, the teams?
Yeah, let's start with Cadillac. But how do you think they're going to get on over the course of the year?
I think Cadillac, I think they'll do all right. I don't think they're going to set the world on fire. I think mainly because they're a brand new team and the lack of experience. I know it's new rules for everybody, but the other teams have been doing this as a team, as a group of individuals, engineers, the drivers, and everything for a period of time. And Cadillac are new. They're trying to make it all work together. I think, not for a lack of trying or anything else, I just think they're going to struggle a bit. And I think if they don't finish last, they'll be happy.
There's so much hype around Williams at the moment, making huge progress forwards. Obviously, they got a couple of podiums last year, so they've really made a move forwards. And James Files has said for a long time now that he hadn't cared about those previous seasons. It was all about 26. It was all about moving forwards, and they made a start on that last year, as we saw. So it'll be interesting to see if they continue that trajectory forwards and get themselves up into at least the top of the midfield regularly every round, possibly even fighting for podiums. If they get to a point second half of the season where they're constantly in a podium fight, they're well on their way to getting back on top. They've obviously got some pretty big competition. There's big news about Mercedes recently. There's obviously been quite a lot of chat with regards to their trick compression that's been going on at the moment. And there is news that the FIA is going to be taking a look at that prior to Barcelona testing. Now, I can't see them banning it at this late stage. And even if they ban it halfway through at the summer break, it just doesn't sit well with me. I feel very uneasy. I think the problem with it, my take on it is, firstly, nobody actually knows if this is true. Is it actually true or is it just rumour? The fact that the FIA are going to have a meeting would indicate there's something going on, what we don't know. It would appear that whatever Mercedes, maybe Red Bull and other engine builders have done is, in my opinion, within the rules. Absolutely.
They've looked at the rules and they've seen a gap, an angle on it, which they've exploited. And everybody's getting really excited over this. And you've got those who are Mercedes fans are going genius. Those who aren't Mercedes fans are going cheat. I always like it when somebody finds a gap. Good on them. Well done.
For me, yeah. I mean, for me, the FIA set out a set of regs. And I'm assuming that they get checked and checked and checked and checked before they get released. So at that point, they are happy with them. If at that point, a team of engineers finds a grey area and maximizes that and makes the most of that, that for me is innovation within the rules. And that is absolutely fine. You know, F1, WRC, all the top level motorsports in their niches, they're all there to find that little bit of extra performance, and that's where it's found. And of late, the last few years, the FIA in a number of different disciplines has done my head in, because as soon as they find that little bit, they ban it.
Yeah.
Like last year with McLaren's heat dissipation material that we were talking about on the brakes. Genius idea. Why ban it? Get the other teams to bloody come up with something.
Yeah, I think the thing with this compression ratio thing, when you look at it and all the rumoured gains they're getting, managed to find out there are some rumoured power advantage they've got, which seems to be the highest figure I can find is 13 brake horsepower. 13. Now, we're talking about cars with a combined electric and internal combustion engine output here of somewhere in excess of 1,000 brake horsepower. I know it's another 13, which is a really nice thing to have. It's 1%. And I know in F1 terms, 1% can make a massive difference. What difference that makes to lap times, I genuinely haven't a clue. But if somebody was sat there with 100 brake horsepower gain or some big number, I'd be a bit more excited. But 13 brake horsepower, I just think somebody's been clever. I love it when these really, really intelligent people, these teams employ, like you were saying last year with McLaren and the trick metal for the brake ducts and things like that. I absolutely love that when somebody is thinking so far outside the box or laterally that they'll come up with these solutions which just give them that bad thing. And I think that makes it, yeah, if they have gained a bit, fair enough. I think with all the other changes in the cars, I think there's going to be quite an interest. I'm hoping for quite an interesting disparity of lap times.
So am I.
Knowing who's got it. And the thing is, where are they gaining or losing on those lap times? Is it aero? Is it engines? I think some drivers will be able to cope with the active aero. Your Alonso's of this world. Verstappen, who's just some sort of freak, who will be able to make it work.
It might actually open up some creative options, to be fair. People diving down the inside where normally they wouldn't have done. I'm thinking Hülkenberg for that. I'm thinking a bit of a hero performance from people like Hülkenberg who can just go, yeah, whatever, let's go. Let's have it. We've got a brand new track, and it's the second race to be happening in Spain this year. Completely brand new. Carlos Sainz Sr. drove it earlier in his Dakar Ford, and it's the Spanish GP at Madrid. Have you seen much about that?
I've seen little bits about it. I'm not a fan of street circuits or temporary circuits, I think is the best phrase of it. I like big, open circuits. We haven't seen the completed thing. I hate some of these more modern things. One of my favourite pet hates is the Saudi Grand Prix in Jeddah, where you're racing between concrete walls. The images on the TV are, it's a car flashes from between two concrete walls, goes round a corner and disappears between two concrete walls again. If it's like that, it's going to drive me to distraction. The actual circuit itself looks all right, but until somebody's driven there. But why do we need another Grand Prix? Why do we need one on an industrial estate on the outskirts of Madrid?
They're saying that it's a hybrid track. So it's somewhere between a regular circuit and street circuit. As to how much of that is going to go either way, I'm not sure, but there has been a lot of interest in it. I mean, it's got some bloody fast sections in it. I think it's got a potential, or it could just fall flat on its face. As long as it's not yet another street circuit, I'll be happy. I don't want them to go the other way either, because one of the tracks I really, really don't like is the Paul Ricard track in France. It's too wide. It's like driving in a giant car park. Way too much runoff. Way too much. Too many painted sections. It's not a nice track.
Whenever you see that, it looks like somebody has taken a runway and painted a circuit onto it.
Yeah,
there isn't actually any corners. I don't know, it's when you go to some of these track days on an old airfield and there's a line of cones which make a corner between the cones. No. I mean, if you want a corner, dig the rest of it up. Put some grass down.
Well, it's funny that I've spoken to a few people about this very matter, actually, about track limits. There's a very simple way to deal with track limits. Stick some grass and then some gravel, and that will stop them. That will completely stop them from taking that risk. Right, we'll be back in a second, just after this break. Hi, and welcome back. So we've just been speaking a little bit about the F1 season and the changes that are coming for 26, but let's move on to rallying, to the WRC. Lots of things happening, not just in this last year of Rally 1, but also in preparations for the transition to the new regs coming in 27. Before we get to 27, let's take a look at this year, though. Let's start with the WRC driver lineup ahead of this week's Monty. So, who do you think is going to do well? What do you think about the driver team setup? What are your thoughts?
It's a bit of a... Unfortunately, I'm sad to say, I think it's going to be a bit of a one-horse race. I scribbled down here thinking about this. Toyota, they've got the best car.
Okay. Garry, after 3, let's both say the name of the person we think is going to be that one horse. 3, 2, 1. Ogier. Yeah. It's got to be, hasn't it?
Unless he has a car problem or he bins the car, which he has done in the past, lets Elfin or somebody else through, I think it's his to lose rather than theirs to win.
Well, Ogier signed up for 10 out of the 14 rounds, which is the vast majority of them. Last year, I think it was only 8, if I remember rightly, and he still won the championship, despite everybody else.
I think the thing is, when you look back at it, they're sort of saying, Elfin placed. Did he have a podium at every rally? Or at least
most of them
scored points at every rally? I think, unfortunately for him, Ogier won everything he entered, or he won far more. And after that, unfortunately, it was simple maths. I think Elfin went down the Burns, drive steadily, accumulate points at every round, very sensible, very mature. But unfortunately, he's up against the guy who can just win every rally if it goes for him. The guy's experience, the car is obviously the quickest. They've got money to spend, the best funded. I don't want to see it like that. I want to see a competition. I want to see a competition between drivers in a team. I want to see a proper competition between the teams themselves. Do Toyota do team orders?
No, I don't think they do. I don't think they need to. I think from their point of view, so that they're going to win the 26 championship, because I don't see Hyundai overcoming their issues from last year, let alone coming into this season with anything close to a competitive package. It's too far gone, I think, at this point, especially considering the reg changes next year. I think the main difference, to be honest, between Ogier and, let's say, Evans, is that when Ogier is leading the championship and he's first on the road every single rally, he's making more of his Fridays than Elfin does. Elfin tends to struggle with the conditions, and he's quick, yes, but he's not in the same ballpark as Ogier. Ogier has that a little nuance, and he knows when to push, and he knows when to back off, and he knows when to give it everything. And it's that skill, that knowledge, that experience that gets him those wins. I think on a Friday, Elfin's just losing too much time. and he's too far away at the end of the rally.
You decided off about predictions. I'd never really thought about predictions for Monte Carlo. I thought about predictions for the year. And I just wrote down my three predictions. Firstly, the champion driver, strangely enough, will be driving a Toyota.
Yeah.
I don't think you get any better than evens on that as a bet. You won't get any money at all on the fact that I think the championship team will be, Toyota. But my wildcard prediction is that M Sport will win a rally.
What makes you think that?
I just want them to. Come on.
You want them to? Oh, okay.
I want them to. I really, really want them to win a rally, or at least get on the podium. I really, really do. Because the championship, nobody cares. Toyota, they've got 4 or 5 cars in most rounds.
I think that both them and Hyundai are 5 driver teams.
Yeah. It's going to, they're just going to be battling out between them. I think everybody who likes the sport wants to see a proper competition. And I think if M Sport, I'll be over the moon if they won a rally. I think if they got on the podium, it'd be fantastic, because that will get people thinking it isn't a monopoly.
Yeah. I mean, obviously,
yeah.
I mean, I am a Ford fan, and I'm a huge fan of M Sport and the work they do. I think they do a fantastic job, given their budget is so much less than the competition. The heart and the passion behind that team is probably second to none in a service park. Unfortunately, they're not in a position to be able to fight. They don't have that funding and they don't have that development. And I just don't think the car's fast enough. Now, here is an interesting idea. Is either of their 2 drivers quicker and braver than Greg Munster was last year? Because if they are, and they pull a Sesks out, they're in with a shot of at least a podium.
I think they're equal to him. I really do. I don't think he was massively streets ahead of them. And the fact that the news seems to have broken now that Sesks seems to have got, is it 5 or 6 rounds with M Sport?
Well, actually, the last I heard was that he was still in discussions with them. So potentially, if you heard something a bit more...
I'm sure over the weekend I read somewhere that he's got either... It's not all the rounds. He's got 5 or 6 rounds, starting in Sweden, and he's on the entry list for Sweden.
Yeah, he is,
Puma. Yeah. So, and it's all money. It's all money. Ability, unfortunately, doesn't get you a seat. Money helps.
Especially with a team like M Sport, it's all about the money. And yeah, Sesks was the obvious choice, and I'm sure they would have snapped him up had he have had the budget in place to do it. He's proved himself more than enough that he's the quicker of any of the drivers that have driven that Puma of late. Certainly since Ogier was part of the team. I think he probably could pull a decent season together if he could get the money to do every round. And I think he'd certainly give them a run for their money. But it's not going to happen this year. Hopefully, maybe next year or in future years. As for both of our Irish drivers, I want to see them do well. I really want to see them do well, especially in lieu of not having an Irish round in the WRC, or a British round for that matter. Josh McElwain is a great driver and he's a great story. He's a really good person to have in the sport in terms of how he is at stage end and what have you. But John Armstrong's story, he started on sims and he won the World Sim Racing Championship in 2018. And he's gone from that to sitting in a World Rally car, a Rally 1 car, sorry. That is an amazing story. And if he has anywhere near a half-decent season this year, that'll be a massive box tick for him. I'm hoping they have a good season, and I want them to be in the fight for a podium, especially if Hyundai, for instance, have an absolute mare, which is always a possibility. It would be nice to see them there to sort of mop those up. But we haven't spoken about the big... Can we call him a big signing? Yeah, I think we can. Toyota's big signing this year, we've got an old name back in. We've got Oliver Solberg joining the ranks of Rally One. I am loving it. I cannot wait to see Oliver on the stages. I mean, he proved it in Estonia last year. He can win a rally. Whether or not he can translate that across the whole season, we'll see. But I mean, having a Solberg back in WRC is amazing.
I think having a Solberg back in is good news. He's a good driver. The person who could come unstuck, I think, is Evans. Solberg, I think, could be stealing his points, or what he sees as his points. Whereas last season, Fogier's doing the rally. No, I mean, Evans could have been sort of saying to himself, I must be good for first or second here, maybe. Now, all of a sudden, first, second, or third. I mean, he could be move down the pecking order through no fault of his own, that the team have recruited somebody in who's that little half a notch better.
And it goes back to what I said before about Evans's Fridays. If he has a bad Friday or an average Friday, and Solberg has a better Friday because he's got a better road position, he's not as likely to lose it. The feeling I've got at the moment is that I don't think Oliver will. I think he's got a lot of experience in a lot of different cars now. He's won WRC2. He's familiar with the roads. Obviously, he's got to adapt for Rally 1, but his head's better. He's much more level-headed.
I think his head's better, and he's still got youth on his side.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the older you get, you could say, yes, it's experience, but you don't necessarily get any faster. Yeah, you can have the experience, you get to know the rallies and all this sort of thing. You've got to have the raw speed there as part of your DNA. And if you've got that, you can polish it. If you haven't got it, you can't make it out of thin air. It's not there. And I think Solberg is potentially, because of his experience, his background, the family behind him, to be quite honest, he's served an apprenticeship. All the different things he's done, the different cars he's driven, and he's now waited to that moment in time where everything, because didn't he have a dabble in a Rally 1 a couple of years ago?
And he drove for Toyota. No, Hyundai. He drove for Hyundai. He had a massive accident. A huge, massive accident. And
maybe that was too early for him. Maybe this now, it's just going to hit the sweet spot. And I think it'd be great for Oliver. I don't think it's going to be particularly good news for anybody else around him.
No, probably not. If we look a few years back at Adrian Fomeau, for instance, he had a similar story. He was put up to Rally 1 for Ford, crashed a lot, got taken back. He did the British, won it, came back much stronger, much more level-headed, built on that and started getting podiums for Ford before obviously moving on. And Adrian's just going to keep climbing. He'll get some wins this year.
What do you think about Hyundai then going back to the old multi-driver third car setup? I've got my own thoughts on that.
I think for them, it's probably a sensible idea going for experience. They're not going to have the car, and they know that they're not going to have the car. They know it's not there. They're looking at Rally 2 for 27 and beyond. Whether that Rally 2 develops into a proper WRC 27 or not, we'll wait and see. So their focus is largely on 27. So to have that rotating third car with experience is probably a good, sensible option. It's going to allow the main two drivers to push on every event, knowing that if one of them has an accident, you've got a pretty decent driver coming up behind to keep those team points. And in Hayden Paddon and Danny Sordo and Esa-Pekka Lappi, they've got some really good drivers there. I'm not sure Esa-Pekka's head is there. The last time he was in Rally 1, he was very down on himself, and I think his self-belief wasn't quite where it needed to be. Danny Sordo has been in and out and in and out so many times he must be dizzy, which is a shame because I actually rate the man. I think he's a pretty damn good driver, especially on tarmac. Obviously, Hayden Paddon's back. Everybody's been saying that he should be part of the WRC team, so it's a good signing from them. I think, it's a good idea. I can't really fault their decision making on that.
I am not convinced about this multi-driver setup at all. I know I've read bits about why they've done it, but you think you're only driving, 5 rallies? 4 rallies? And if you're only getting the proper feel of the car once every 3 months or 2 months, as opposed to somebody who was in it every single round, yes, you could say, we've got 3 people testing the car. We've got 3 lots of feedback. Isn't this wonderful? It is if they're all saying the same thing, but if they're all saying different things.
Yeah, I take your point, but I think that their purpose isn't to win rallies unless something monumental happens up front. Their job is just to bank points. That's it. So 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, whatever it happens to be, it's take points off Toyota wherever and whenever possible. That's their only job. And they're great drivers. So, I mean, Hayden's been driving the Hyundai for years. And the other two, that was the last car that they drove. So it's not a million miles away from what they used to know anyway. I think they'll be back on track within a couple of rallies. You're right. They're not going to be at the same level as Ogier, but they don't need to be either. I don't think they need to be.
Be interesting. I just think that this year he's going to be a bit of a holding year. If we're not careful, it could turn into a Toyota benefit. And I personally am just maybe looking a bit forward to next year, because I think next year has got so many variations in it, proper variations, that's going to be really interesting, as opposed to this year, which is looking potentially a little bit predictable.
I think, it is predictable, isn't it? If Toyota don't win, I'll be surprised. And if Ogier doesn't walk away with his 10th title, I'll also be surprised. There is no point in Ogier turning up to 10 rallies every year if he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't need the money. He doesn't need to prove himself.
I think when you get to elite sports people, you are talking about a deep desire to win. I think a lot of them will say, we don't look at numbers. We don't look at this. We don't look at that. He could be the first man ever to be a 10 times world champion.
And he wants that.
Yeah.
He wants to beat Seb Loeb. And he always has.
Yeah. So he has got that golden opportunity here. Yes, you say, he's only doing 10 rallies. I bet they're his favourite 10 rallies.
Yeah, I bet they are as well.
He isn't doing that single venue event in the middle of nowhere. He isn't doing that one. He's doing the ones he enjoys and he thinks he's going to do best at.
I think he'll be walking away with his 10th title. And I think Elfyn will be close. But it'll be, for the season, I'm going to go Ogier winning it. Elfyn a very close second. Again. And I'm going to go wild card, and I'm going to go Solberg in 3rd.
I'm sorry. You've almost taken you have to take the words out of my mouth. I'll go with exactly the same. I can't see it. Exactly the same. I think the only difference would be, the only wild card would that maybe Solberg could be second.
He's going to have one hell of an amazing year. He's going to have to pull off the performance.
He doesn't have to remember. But between the two of them, I think they're going to be taking points off one another. So they're going to be both further away than... I think they're going to be very close on points, Evans and Solberg. But because they are pinching points off one another, Ogier will get an even easier ride, because those two will be squabbling amongst themselves.
Obviously, 2026 brings back something that everybody has wanted for a long time, a new manufacturer. Lancia are back, and it's Monty.
I think it's great. So I wouldn't describe it as a manufacturer. I'd like to describe it as a brand.
Okay. I'm glad you actually mentioned that, because that's obviously one side of the story that a lot of people are saying. And I get it. I do. I get it. But if you look at the wider context, most of the automotive landscape are all umbrella companies now. There are very, very few standalone brands, let's call them, shall we, that could enter under their own name, like Audi have in F1. Most of them are under umbrella companies like Stellantis. And the fact that they've now chosen Lancia instead of Peugeot, personally, to me, it makes no bloody difference. To have that name, that iconic name back in the WRC, just to have the name in there is amazing. And who knows, over the course of the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, however long they decide to be in it, they may become full Lancias again. I mean, it's never going to be a Delta. It's never going to be an 037. Do you know what I mean? It's those days have been and gone. It's time for a new generation moving forwards, and it has to be under Stellantis because it's the only way that it could survive. To be honest, up to a few years ago, I didn't even know Lancia was still about. I thought they'd gone under and they were toast in history.
I think the thing is, whether you want to call it a brand, a manufacturer, or something else, you have got somebody who is new to the sport. Somebody's bringing something new to it, additional. It's a different team. If it's getting people's imagination, you've got all your TikTok generation who might also think, Lancia, what's that? I'm sure they're still big in Italy, but like you sort of said, I don't know how many years ago it is since they sold a car in this country. I don't know if they've got any plans to sell any more either. But that's irrelevant, really. You have got somebody joining the WRC under a new name, brand, whatever. And I think if that is helping build and support the sport, we've got to applaud it and welcome them.
Yeah. I think so, because you can't constantly say we need more manufacturers or brands to come in and then complain when they do. I know it's Stellantis, I know it's a group, but it's a name from the past. We don't have Audi because they're too busy with their F1 car. We don't have Mercedes, although we do in the BTCC. There are very few. Honda have never really been interested in the WRC, I don't think. So the choice is pretty limited. So I'm going to applaud them and I'm going to welcome them in, and I look forward to seeing how they perform. Who knows, in 27, when the regs change and they've got a year of development in the car, they might even be winning it. Who knows?
Yeah, I think you'll find out fairly quickly, have they basically got a competitive car? Because they're up against some very, very good existing Rally 2 cars. So they've got a massive benchmark there. I don't think we'll find where they are on that. Not straight away. It's a case of where are they at the beginning and do they actually make progress? And if they are up there swapping times with people and they're slowly getting faster, that's good. It's good for competition. It's good for everybody.
I mean, the first couple of rounds of the WRC have always been specialist. You've got the Monty, which is out there on its own. Then we move to Sweden. Again, pretty much our only full snow event. And you don't really get into regular forest gravel rallies till the third or fourth event. So we'll see once we get to there how they're performing. But I wish them well, and I'm really, really hoping that they do well and they actually start to sell some motors again. I hope they're brave enough as well, especially with the change in the EU's directive on electric cars, to actually put a decent hot hatch out. Easy for me to say.
You notice that Skoda have done that to celebrate their 130th, 125th birthday. You can now get a Skoda, what's the little one called? The Felicia?
Fabia?
Yeah, Fabia. The small one, the Fabia. They have now they haven't gone back to, called it a full VRS, but they're doing a mildly hot one with stickers and nice wheels and stuff like that on it.
Just trim then.
It's trim. I think it's got a more powerful engine than any of the others. It's a proper thing. You're thinking, maybe there is hope.
I hope so. Anyway. I mean, in a wider sense, I've started to see bits of old come back, and I'm hoping that things settle back down again and we start and enjoy driving again. I won't get into that because that's an entirely different kettle of fish to get into. I could, but I won't.
Quick one for you now. We've mentioned 27. We've touched on 27. This is the last year of Rally 1. What do you think of Rally 1 as a formula? Do you think it's worked? Has it not worked? What would you have done differently?
I haven't had the pleasure of seeing them live.
Neither have I.
I will say that up front. However, I have spoken to somebody who is very well in the know, who has seen them live and says just how amazing they are to watch live. However, they haven't really fulfilled the role of a top flight car in motorsport. They've been too niche, too expensive, and they haven't been sold to, let's say, the general public in terms of private teams.
Well, they were totally restricted just for the WRC.
That's what I mean. Yeah,
you couldn't use them in any other competitions. So your rich clubman who might have had a $500,000 or so, happy to burn on a Rally 1 car, couldn't. Well, he could, but he couldn't use it
outside of the WRC. No, and I think that was a major flaw in Rally 1. To begin with, it had the electric side of it too, and then they decided, oh, that's a bit too fragile. You want how much to repair it? Every single rally? No tar. And then it got taken away. I think it's borderline a failed project. It could have done better.
Yeah, I wrote down here, not a classic.
It's really not, is it? I don't think it's going to go down in the annals of rallying history in the same way that Group B or the 90s WRC cars did.
Yeah. I think, given time, I'm not going to say how long, I think it'll actually get forgotten. If you mention Group B to almost anybody who's got an inkling of interest in rallying, regardless of their age, you say Group B, you will get a reaction.
You will.
I'm sure if you said Rally 1 to the vast majority of people, there'd be a fair percentage of blank faces.
Yeah, it's just, it never really got into the public consciousness in the way that other style cars have, like Group B or Group 4 Escorts. They just didn't spark the imagination in the same way. Yes, they were bloody fast. Yes, they were bloody capable. But they just weren't lovable. This is probably going to be a really controversial thing to say, and people in the comments are going to go mental. But I really don't like the way they look. They're ugly as sin. There isn't a single pretty Rally 1 car out there. Not a single one. I've never liked any of them. And obviously I never will because it's been canned. But no, it's not for me. Not for me. I'm looking forward to...
I think you've made that clear.
Yeah. Do you know what? In the past couple of years, I've still watched Rally 1. I've still watched the WRC, but I've started watching ERC with all the Rally 2s and actually enjoyed it far more. The competition has been there. The cars look like cars you can go and drive on the road. It's exactly what rallying was always about.
I would just say, go and watch BTRDA, Gold Star Forest Rallying.
Well, yeah, it's
fantastic. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm a regular Raponian in, well, all of the rallies up here, to be honest. Always have been since a little kid. Here's the name for you. Cartel Rally, 1988. I was there.
National Breakdown before it.
National Breakdown before
and
it.
And the Mintex before that.
Yes, somewhere I've got a Mintex sticker on some scrapbook somewhere. I'm hoping it still exists. Yeah, very fond memories that I don't share with Rally 1, to come back to your point.
Do you think a part of that living in the UK is because we're sulking because we haven't seen them in the UK?
Okay, I wouldn't go so far as to say I sulked. Yes, it would have been lovely to have seen a Rally 1 car on British forests. Yes, absolutely. And perhaps I will hold my hand up and say, having never seen one live, if I had have done, my opinion might be different. I'm sure people are going to go, yeah, you're right, it will. You're probably right. I'm not going to disagree with you. But the fact is, I haven't seen one, and it hasn't translated over the TV like it did with the others.
I've just been thinking, but I'm old enough to have seen the 85 and 86 RSA rally. And think about the Group B cars. Yes, there were the Group B cars and everything else. And while you were saying that, I've just been thinking, because of the formula and how things are built, all the Rally 1 cars, like you've pointed out, are never going to win a beauty contest. They're all of a size. You think back to the Group B cars, and try not to keep going backwards here. They all looked very different. They were all different sizes. They had completely different engine configurations. They were all different, very, very different answers to the same problem. Because of how the world works these days and everything's that restricted by the regs and everything, all these cars look all the Rally 1 cars, it's the same.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're not fast, but it's just...
They're not individual enough. They're not unique. I reckon probably would be something that could help the WRC in the future. Allow a bit more individuality. I know that 27, that's kind of coming because you can build your own car now to a point. And I'm really hoping that will translate into some unique motors on the WRC. I really do, because we've lost that. Where are the pin-up cars? You've got you've got a choice of 3 cars. I'm not a fan of the Puma, never really have been. I think it looks a bit like Thunderbird 2. It's horrible. I'm hoping that the new regs do bring some individuality to the cars, because it's needed. I mean, in terms of the WRC future, what are you thinking? Well, there's all sorts going on. We've still got an absence of a promoter going into 26.
I think the promoter is a massive thing, which has been missed by a lot of people. Its importance. I think you could almost do a show on where does Rally need to go and everything. I think the thing I'm really interested in is, apart from Toyota and this project Rally 1, nobody else has actually committed to building one of these WRC 27 cars we're aware of. So that's interesting. And how will these compare to the performance of a Rally 2 car? That are we going to be sat here after next year's Monte Carlo and there's been 4 WRC 27 cars which finished 17 hours ahead of the Rally 2 cars? Or are they going to be even Stevens? If this formula gives them a massive advantage, you could have a really, really sad season next year with the WRC 27 cars just driving off into the distance, where the Rally 2 cars are struggling against it.
The Rally 2s are supposed to be brought up towards the 27s, and the Rally 1s are coming down to the 27s. So they're supposed to meet somewhere in the middle. I'm assuming that the 27s are going to be still a little bit faster. I don't think it's going to be huge amounts, because that's just going to take the Rally 2s out. The question is, if they're too close. Yeah. I do wonder though, if they end up being too close, are they just going to build a Rally 2 car? Because it's cheaper.
Why bother building a bespoke vehicle? And at the end of the day, it's sport, but you're talking car manufacturers, and this is about selling cars. You have got a Fiesta, you've got Hyundai, you've got Skodas, you've got Lancias, which look like something you can go out and buy. Now, I remember years ago, I had a friend who specifically bought a silver Chevette, because it's like the one which goes rallying, which just proves you can get people hooked into this, which looks like something you can buy. So these manufacturers and people entering at the WRC level are there to sell cars.
Yeah.
And
if they start to, if they all of a sudden they go, hang on, we're selling a few more motors now, even if it's a rally car, even if we've sold another 10 this year. That's great news. That's going in exactly the right direction for what they need.
So I think it's going to be a really, really sort of interesting year. But I think the promoter is the real elephant in the room. I think the promoter, I think there's talk of it being a 25-year contract, and in my opinion, it needs sorting. It was going to be December, timed so when Saudi had finished, we can announce it. What happened? Silence.
Yeah.
We're now in Monty week, more silence. I think the promoter's got a hell of a job thinking, where do we go? How do we get more engagement? How do we get more following? I don't think there's any argument over what's needed. I think that it's the how are you going to achieve that? And that is a massive.
Yeah, it is. You're right. It's massive. But I hope they don't fall into the usual traps of short-term attention spans, because we're not all like that. And in fact, a lot of the current generation aren't like that either. They want long-form motorsport. Those that are involved, those that are interested, they still want the long-form versions. They've got the attention span for it.
But don't you think that almost every motorsport lends itself to both forms? That if you want the long form, you can watch the whole event. But if you want the short form, you can go on YouTube, you can go on TikTok, and you can watch the highlights. You can watch the juicy bits. You can serve it up quite easily on two levels. Well, I know what you mean. For my sins, I don't often admit this, I used to like NASCAR. And I used to love watching a 500-mile race, hundreds of lead changes, multiple pit stops, absolute mayhem. Oh no, it's now been broken down into 4 separate sections. So now there are 4 125-mile races and a very complicated system for points and everything. And at that stage, I left the building.
Yeah, I think it's all too easy to ruin it. And I really hope they have the conviction not to. See, for me, they do get a lot of criticism, but for me, the promoter who is responsible actually produces one hell of a package we could only dream of back in the 80s and 90s. The coverage is excellent. The presenters largely are excellent. And it is second to none, but it's almost gatekept to the level of secrecy. In terms of, and what I mean by that is you could do so much with the product that you're producing that they're just not. Everything is behind a paywall. And I get that. I do. But you also produce a highlights package. You produce one-off shows. And yes, they've got, Man and Machine on YouTube, but that's an exception to the rule. Get the highlights show out on domestic TV whilst it still exists. Or on a streamer. Get it out there for free to hook in the new audience. You've got it there already. Use it. Use your specials. Use your archival footage. Don't just hold it in a room and do nothing with it.
I think the problem with rallying is when I first started following it, it was quite simple. The guy who spent the least amount of time in all the stages won. Now, that's quite easy to get your head round. If you get to the end, and you've done it in the shortest possible time, you won. No, because it gets a bit tricky. We're going to have split the points now after a Saturday and award some points on a Sunday, and then we're going to throw in the power stage where there's this, that, and the other. And that guy who you haven't seen for 2 days, he can now restart for the power stage or something. And he's just like, oh, for God's sake. The guy who you think's winning, for some reason, doesn't get all the points. I just find it feels like a layer of complication I don't really need. Formula One luckily still is in its basic form. The guy who goes past a checkered flag wins. You can understand that. And I think rallying, certainly at WRC level, has lost its way a bit in trying to produce something different.
They're trying to produce excitement where it didn't really need, because rallying is an exciting sport all on its own. It doesn't need it artificially creating. So this multiple restarts that you're allowed when you go off. No, if you're out, you're out.
If you've binned it.
You've binned it. Yeah, that's rallying. If you've binned it, you go, oh well, next rally. And then messing about with all the points differences with like Super Sunday. No, it's overcomplicated nonsense. Fastest to the finish wins. Simple as. Everybody knows where you are. Like you say.
I think what I'm getting to here is that what the promoter's got to do isn't engaged with people like us two. We're complete addicts to this. We're just going to carry on going and buying this stuff, whatever they manage to do with it. If you're going to make the sport grow and get better and get back to where the popularity it had before, I'm not going back, start talking about cars and things from the past, but get the popularity there and get that engagement. You have got to make this sport appeal to the people who, dare I say, won't listen to this podcast, won't look on YouTube for bits of rallying footage because they maybe are ignorant to it. They don't even know it exists, or they haven't been told about it in the right place. I think that's what the promoters got to do. And I think one of the key things here is the WRC, these service parks. I've never actually been to a full-blown WRC event. I've been to the RAC rally when it was part of the WRC back in the day. But these service parks and everything, the vast majority of them, and even rallies in this country, because of the nature of the events, you can't go anywhere near town. It'll cause traffic problems. Oh, no, can't be having that. No, get the rally to the people. Look at the successful rallies. The East Yorkshire Rally, Tarmac one, was in the British Rally Championship last year. It starts in the middle of town. It starts in the middle of Beverley. Bring the rally into the town. I'm sure the Malcolm Wilson used to start on Cockermouth Main Street. Don't push the rally out to some industrial estate in the middle of nowhere, which nobody can go near. Bring it to where the people are. Start it in the middle of, like you mentioned earlier, the cartel that used to start in Bradford in the middle of in front of the town hall. Created absolute chaos. But people knew there was something going on. The people who knew nothing about rally, like, oh, what's going on here? Oh, look at the cars. Aren't they noisy? That's the sort of thing you got to do. We're quite happy to shut roads down for just about anything under the sun these days.
It is interesting as to what they could do. We'll have to wait and see.
There are things there. I think the one thing we can't get away from, rallying, because you're effectively doing a stage from A to B and you're doing multiple stages, it's a long, strung-out, linear event. And the problem with that is it doesn't lend itself to TV.
Well, it's funny you should say that. We could look at, and people are thinking about changing from the cloverleaf back to potentially a more linear design. But it's funny you should mention that it's not great for TV, because in our third and final part of the show, we actually take a look back and ask the question, what if you took the rules of rallying, completely binned them, and reinvented them for a special one-off event? What if you were to take the rules of rallying and reinvent them for a one-off event? Well, this is exactly what happened in the late 80s for what became a 2-year event. And we owe it all to BBC's Ski Sunday. The BBC set the challenge to come up with a way to promote and help educate the audience about this amazing but little understood sport. It was indeed a bold new idea, and one that would alter the course of not just rally coverage, but the British Touring Car Championships coverage too. But before we get into that, let's go back a bit. For those of us who had already fallen in love with the sport, we needed no convincing to pack a flask and head out into the stages to watch our heroes battle it out. Rallying had grown from the gentlemanly days of the 60s and 70s into an ultra-competitive sport where tenths of seconds were traded in the race for glory. Thanks to Audi, it became all too clear that four-wheel drive was the only choice. And with the introduction of Group B, the sport was set for a meteoric rise in popularity throughout the 80s. Big power, big flames, full sends, and lots of action. But as with so many quick success stories, the bubble burst in 1986 with the total ban of Group B and the monsters it had created. Too many accidents and an almost absence of crowd control in places had made it impossible to continue. For 1987, what replaced it was Group A. Slower cars that were stronger, safer, and looked just like the cars you drove to work in. Almost. Rallying in the 80s was a spectacle, but only if you could get to an event. For those that couldn't, your only option was to read about it in the paper or hope for a short segment on Grandstand, BBC's flagship sports show. But in 1989, things were about to change in a very interesting way. Joining me today is a legend of sports TV broadcasting with a career spanning 48 years. He became the voice of motorsport for a generation, finishing off commentating on the BTCC. But today, he's here to talk about the Mobil 1 Rally Challenge. I am more than excited to welcome to the show, Mr. Steve Ryder.
Good morning.
Good morning. So can we just first of all start by setting the scene, if you could? So prior to, 88, 89 perhaps? Where were you? What were you up to? And how did you come about meeting Barry?
Prior to 88, 89, I joined the BBC in 1985. Very fortunate to join at a fairly elevated level, presenting Sports Night and Grandstand. I'd moved across from a similar role on ITV, and during the course of which I'd linked up with Barry during the ITV years, the early 80s. Working really for fun on things like the World Rally Championship when I possibly could, and also the British Championship, and feeding into the output of World of Sport. And then when I moved across to the BBC, we took that relationship with us and managed to develop the coverage of the World Rally Championship and the British Championship within Grandstand, and that brought us to the end of all the excitement of the Group B era. And we got to about 88, 89, and we're looking around to develop the coverage, to take it on to a next level, or maybe to go into a completely different direction. And that different direction was the British Touring Car Championship, the coverage of which we launched in 1989. But in the midst of that, we were challenged with taking the rally coverage to a different level if we possibly could. And that's where the Mobil 1 Rally Challenge came in. It was a fun experiment. It lasted a couple of years, and I think it got people's attention, but it was a great thing to work on, but it was a very sort of challenging time for motorsport coverage in general.
Well, it was, because, of course, back in those days, rally TV coverage was quite thin, apart from the coverage that you guys provided for us on Grandstand. It was obviously nothing like that we've got today. And I remember as a kid, I used to look forward to those moments when it did come on. But with regards to the Rally Challenge itself, how did specifically the idea for the Rally Challenge come about, and why do you feel it needed to be conceived in the first place?
Well, the most important thing in the Rally Challenge and the rally coverage in general was the support that we got from the hierarchy at the BBC. I mean, what we were doing was, a slightly dodgy operation. We were using manufacturers' money and a little bit of sponsorship from within the sport to generate the coverage that goes on this wonderful free-to-air animal called the BBC, which has no end of rules and regulations against that kind of thing. So we were always on a little bit of a tightrope in terms of the legality of what we're doing, if you like, for the BBC. So any kind of reaction from the highest level of the BBC, we went, oh my gosh, we're for the chop here. But there was a head of sport and a very sort of forward-thinking guy, a legendary head of sport at the BBC called Jonathan Martin. And he came to us. We'd done a couple of years of the British Open Rally Championship, and we'd done the World Championship and so on. And they were little sort of 12, 14-minute inserts into Grandstand between the horse races and all that sort of thing. And he said, I want to talk to you about the rallying. And we thought, oh, gosh. And he said, I launched a program when I was at your level called Ski Sunday. And we used to do all the, the winter sports and so on. And then realized that, we weren't doing anything to really increase people's understanding of the sport. So he launched, what became, a very, very well-known Sunday afternoon program, Ski Sunday. And he said the great thing about Ski Sunday is that you see everyone come down the hill and you see a camera pretty much on the last 2.5 minutes of their run. So somebody loses an edge on the outside of that bend, you can see where they lose a couple of seconds and all that sort of thing. And he said that's what rallying needs. He said rallying is fine for, great pictures, but, if they go into the forest for 20 minutes, and come out a second and a half, behind the great, you can't see how, why, what, or whatever. It is just great pictures. Yeah. So why not design something where you see every second of every stage, and you can do the old split screen, and you can actually, in theory, define where one driver is quicker than the other.
Yeah.
And he said that's what rallying needs. If you can have a stage where every second or the majority of the stage is covered by cameras, be it onboard cameras or be it trackside cameras, so that you can actually analyze where one driver's approach is different to another. He said you can actually emphasize the competitive element of rallying and the technique and where one guy is faster than another. Go away and try and invent something that will do that. And of course, to do that, you have to have complete control of the event. So we came up with an idea for, I think it was 6 stages, couple of miles long. The gaps will be filled by the evolving technology of onboard cameras. We will flood the thing with as many trackside cameras as we physically could, and do it in a manner in which, the old split screen thing of Louise is quicker here because she's done that. Penty is quicker there because he's done that. And try to give the viewer a little bit of an insight into the competitive element. It's not just cars going fast. It's not just clouds of dust. It is actually what the driver is doing, and what the driver is doing in comparison to an opponent and so on. It was a worthy attempt. And the other great benefit of what we were trying to do is it gave you time to talk to the drivers, and it gave you time to explore who they were, what they were about, the sense of rivalry, what they were bringing to their sport, their craft, their technique, why one is different to another. And we had a lot of fun with it because whatever came across on the screen, there was a lot of standing around and chatting and drinking cups of tea and coffee and just talking. And you never got the chance to do that when you're covering the Open Championship or something like that. So I'm not surprised it didn't last much longer than 2 years, because the whole thing got overtaken by technology that really is able to deliver that kind of coverage. But it was an attempt, and it was, we were very lucky in the kind of personalities that we got to take part, and the level of manufacturers that got involved as well.
Indeed. Well, I'm pleasantly surprised, one, that it was the BBC behind it, rather than yourselves or another independent taking it to them, that wanted to take on the sport and explain the sport for the majority of people who just don't have a clue about rallying. So that's kind of interesting. And the other point that you made about the technology was also interesting, because obviously, as we've mentioned at the time, the camera angles and things, that you didn't really get much of that prior to the Mobil 1 Rally Challenge. So, and it was really interesting that you said that was a point of the design of the show really early on. What sort of access did you have to things like in-car cameras? Was that something that the BBC had to develop, or was that an emerging technology at the time?
It was very much emerging technology. And, the great thing was that, unlike providing coverage for an established event, we had complete control. So we had probably an hour to set up each car between each run. So it wasn't a question of, flying into a service area and, our onboard mechanics climbing all over the car. That car wouldn't move until we were absolutely ready to provide the coverage that we wanted. So that was a huge, great luxury. And in 1988, 89, the onboard camera coverage was at a very, very primitive stage. There was nothing. There were no microwave links. that were really cost effective or practical. So everything was recorded on board the car on VHS recorders. I mean, you look at the wider spectrum of motorsport in those days. There were no onboard cameras in Formula One. That was something for the very distant future. So it was a platform for us to try to really exaggerate and to take the viewer as close into the, what was happening in the cockpit and behind the wheel as was physically possible. And to that end, you were able to be particularly cute with camera angles and, stuff that you were able to bolt on in the car and so on. And it was also the technology that enabled us to take a step towards circuit racing the year later. It was the same sort of technology that we brought into the British Touring Car Championship, and of course, what we saw from the next 5 years of the BTCC was based on the antics of various drivers via the onboard camera. And it was a very exciting time because you all know the kind of material that these cameras could generate. But unless you had complete control and a sort of iron grip over the access to the event, you couldn't really reliably produce that. But that was what the Mobil One challenge gave us. And you can't imagine the circumstances in which you could do what has to be called a made-for-television event in quite the same way.
I think it's fair to say, really, then, that the Mobil One Rally Challenge, it kind of really set the blueprint for modern-day rallying coverage, and by the sounds of it, BTCC too. So it's kind of an unsung hero, more so than I realised, which is always nice. So you've got this idea, you've got a very clear idea about the technology, about locking it down. How was it developed there further on than that then? How did it become a reality, as it were?
It needed support, and it needed the support of the BBC to say that not only do we endorse what you're doing, but here is a slot that will exist within Grandstand. So that is 4.5 million viewers day one. Outside of that, we'll also create a half-hour slot somewhere on BBC Two on a Thursday night or something like that to give you an extra platform. So you go away with that kind of broadcast scheduling support, and then it was a question of talking to the manufacturers, and it was gratifying to really get the kind of reaction that we had from manufacturers who were prominent within the British Championship, Ford and Vauxhall and Peugeot and so on. But also, the real sort of headliners like Lancia came across for the second series. And David Richards was a great supporter, bringing the Subaru legacy in for the second year of the challenge. And it was still only the first year in the World Championship for Subaru. So really it was a first opportunity for an audience to get up close to what eventually became a World Championship winning make. And then, of course, you got the drivers who will do whatever they're told just to get behind the wheel of a car.
Yeah.
And it was the great personalities. And it was, I thought that, the interesting thing from my point of view, and I'm not a driver and I'm not, part of that driving community. But the thing that really struck me was you get someone like Louise Aitken Walker or David Llewellyn or someone like that. And, what's up next for us? And he said, oh, you're driving the Lancia. And you think, and you see the look on their face, and it's like, someone at the back of the grid in Formula One being told, have a play around with the Red Bull for a day and so on.
Yeah.
And they were just, all of them, like, kids in toy shops. And it was that look of, wow, I never knew it did this. I never knew we could do that. And it was helping the audience understand what a rally car is all about, as they understood what a rally car was all about. And, it was refreshing because you were taking a step into the unknown along with them. And they're all great communicators in the sport anyway. And it was great to have them on board.
I must admit, it must have been quite brave for David Richards to bring the Legacy in its first year of competition. I mean, obviously they had their teething troubles on the start of the day, which set filming back. I remember that, but it just showed what that car could and would eventually go on to do. But I mean, you mentioned teams, Lancia obviously being one of those. I can imagine a certain amount of gatekeeping, secrecy, that sort of thing going on, because these were still active drivers in their respective championships. So how were the complexities handled with regards to non-team drivers driving the cars? Was that ever an issue?
It never was, and it never became an issue. Really, it was, and that surprised me because I think. At that stage, there was there was a little bit of sort of subterfuge going on, and there were a lot of politics going on, but not to the degree that it put up barriers within the sport. And, drivers were there to understand different characteristics of cars, applaud the things that, really impress them, and, wonder about, things that confuse them. And I think most of the manufacturers there, things like the Vauxhall and the Ford, were well established, and there were no sort of secrets to come out of the bonnet there. But I think that there was a genuine relish and appetite from the manufacturers to make sure that that their car, that their name was going to figure in this series, because apart from anything else, the marketing value of 4.5-5 million people is irresistible. And I think that conquers all sort of confusions about any sort of weird bells and whistles they might have under the bonnet. But it was also a great chance to explore the wider stories of why Lancia has done so well in the World Championship, why Vauxhall has done so well in the British Championship, and so on, and rerun some of the great footage that have been generated in that direction over the last few years, and as a result, it became as much a magazine program as an event program. Okay, you had a leaderboard and you had people going quickly and all that sort of stuff, and you get to a final where the title is up for grabs and all that sort of thing. But and it did become surprisingly competitive in the end. But the wider thing was to create a showcase for rallying in all its levels, and I think it did its job in that respect.
Could you give us a taste of what it was like to film the show then on a typical day? I mean, how long was the run? Was it 5 separate days, or I'm assuming it probably was?
Yeah, we would pitch up. I can't remember how compressed the schedule was, but certainly one round would be a day and a half in terms of shooting. Everyone assembling the night before, and nothing too stressed. With the help of the Forestry Commission and so on, the stages were set out and marshaled pretty well, and from then on, it was a lot. You had, I think, one car and maybe a spare. So Stig Blomqvist would go off on a run. There'd be no real practice runs, but there's probably an hour between each run for the car to be completely refettled to be exactly the same condition and quality for every single run. So if you have the dodgy suspension on, that had to be sorted for the next run. So you have probably the best part of an hour between each run. So it became it should have become tedious, but it was actually very sort of light-hearted and very a lot of sort of coffee and bacon sandwiches and stories about great events on the Isle of Man, or this happened to be on Monte Carlo or something like that, and we tried to capture as much of that as possible. And then so it was a long day, and it was if you were trying to sell it as a live spectator sport, you would have no chance, because you would see a car about every hour and a quarter. And but from the point of view of a compressed television product, it was it was great fun. Great fun.
Are there any stories that you remember from those times in between the stages? Anything funny?
Well, not really. I mean, there was nothing. You know, there were small things that I think.
No drivers setting each other up or pranks or anything crazy like that.
And everyone was very. No, 10/10 is the philosophy of every rally driver, but there was a sort of briefing. Look, don't go out and stuff the car in the trees because the entire program will be in trouble if you do that. So there was a little bit of sort of holding back. I remember that I think Stig on the final round of the at Isle of Man of Series 1 in 1988, was it? Had a fairly big lead, which was rather whittled away, and he won the whole thing by about a second and lost about 10 seconds on the final stage. I think a lot of that was down to becoming very relaxed in the sponsors area for about 6 hours before. I might have that wrong, but but he did make a real sort of exciting finale of it all. And then you had Malcolm Wilson and Penty on the last day of the second series, and you got an idea then from exactly how competitive it was. And Nicky Grist, who was co-driver to Malcolm, was still very, very proud of what they did that day. And I think it really gave an extra insight to the casual viewer of the relationship between driver and co-driver, because so often on a long event, you got a co-driver who has to maintain a sort of dialogue for, a 20-minute stage or something like that. But here it's, don't put a foot wrong for the next 2.5 minutes. And you get a real sense of extra pressure in the relationship, which I think came across in the program.
I think it did. Actually, yeah. It was a really good insight into the inner workings of a crew. Unlike most motorsports that are just a single driver, you really do have a team, and the co-driver provides such a managerial role alongside the obvious co-driving duties. Something that's probably even today not that well understood, to be fair. I
think it's in a way, it's one of the disappointments. I think you talk to David Richards at that time, and you talk to a lot of people at that time, and they had a genuine feeling that World Championship rallying in a few years from that date was going to be on a par with Formula One, and possibly going to take over the prestige of Formula One. It never really happened, and there is still the quandary for World Championship rallying of how it portrays the competitive element and how it portrays one driver against another, when it is so difficult to encapsulate and cover a World Championship rally in its entirety, and also to encapsulate why one driver and one team are better than another. The pictures and the technology of modern World Rally Championship is astonishing, but it still struggles to tell the stories that are there to be told, and it's a shame because it's hard to put your finger on exactly what is missing, but something is. I mean, the world rally champion, can walk down the high street whenever he wants and not be recognised, and it shouldn't be like that, because these guys are on the same par as anything in Formula One.
Absolutely. I do have a question about that, but just before we get on to it, why did the Mobil One Rally Challenge only last 2 years then?
I think it was because it sort of ran its course. It did its job. It was never going to be, it had to become something else if it was going to develop. We could revisit the same, bits of forest in the corners of northern England whenever, but, basically it was, it needed to progress from where it was. And also at the time, you're thinking, right, we can take the characters that we've seen in the Mobil One Rally Challenge, we can follow them a little bit further in the World Championship and the British Open. But at the same time, other things were happening. And I'm not ashamed to say, but the priorities within the BBC were heading towards circuit racing because it was easier to deliver, easier for an audience to make sense of, and I think the proof is that the British Touring Car Championship is still, a cornerstone of motorsport coverage in this country, and
fantastic.
And it's lasted the course. Nothing to do with us. It's all to do with, what has happened within the sport. But
I don't know, Steve. I think your part is a very big part in that little story.
It is very gratifying to see how it works. But it's, but I do feel that, a little bit guilty that it was at the expense of rallying that the Touring Car Championship sort of took over that kind of audience.
I've recently not so much realised, but it's become more and more apparent over the last couple of years that rallying and the BTCC are almost like brothers.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of surprising crossover, and I don't blame circuit racing for being easier to cover. Rallying is a tricky sport to cover. I've always got that, and I understand why. So for the times when we do get it, and as you've mentioned it already, the package that is being produced currently by the WRC promoter is fantastic. We have never been that lucky in history. And I think we really should be thankful. I do think we could do more with it.
Yeah.
But the quality of the product is second to none, especially given the circumstances it's gathered together and produced in. So absolutely well played to them. But the WRC is in a similar position to how it was sort of post 86, I suppose. We are about to lose Rally 1 next year, which is almost a kind of equivalent to Group B, super fast cars. And we are then going to be going to kind of Rally 2, WRC 27 spec, which we're expecting to be slower, as it was in 87. With an environment where attention is waning for the WRC, and where we're in a position where we don't even have a promoter, really, for the WRC, is another rally challenge potentially something along those lines, something that we could bring back as another idea to possibly promote the WRC, do you think?
I think there is certainly room for a kind of sort of restart for the championship. And it depends on the kind of platform that the championship is able to attain. What the advantage that we had in our day is that there was no great competition for an audience. We could go to the BBC and we would say, right, Mobile One Rally Challenge, and there was 4.5 million viewers. The World Rally Championship can't do that. I mean, it can go to someone like TNT or a Channel 5 or something like that, and there's 450,000 viewers, which is never going to launch any kind of global product. But if you could overcome the ultimate challenge of saying to a BBC or ITV, look, take the World Rally Championship, and here is an introduction to the World Rally Championship. If you want to use that horrible expression, a made-for-television kind of introduction. It's got a competitive element. It introduces the drivers. It introduces the technology. It makes sense of all the wonderful pictures that you're about to see over the course of a season. I think there is a real sort of appetite for almost treating it as a new sport. And you see so many sports trying to establish themselves on, the more obscure platforms, and making an immediate impression via social media and via network coverage and so on and so forth. It needs that kind of a restart. It's not enough to say, we've got the best coverage in the world, we've got the best technology, we've got the best onboard cameras and so on, and throwing it up in the air and expecting the audience to latch onto it. There is too much out there. You've got to be elbows out, and you've got to be really sort of aggressive and have a strong belief in the product. And that's where a new promoter and an imaginative promoter is desperately needed, because it's weird that you get a sport where the product is there, but the outlet isn't there. And in the world of television we've got at the moment, the outlet isn't going to be there. The audience isn't going to be there. It's going to be via social media. And I must confess, I don't understand how social media works. And, it was great fun to wander up to the head of sport of the BBC and get a 4.5 million audience immediately. I mean, you can make that work. It doesn't work like that anymore.
No, the landscape of TV is most definitely changing, and it's changing rapidly. I do wonder if there's, not just somebody in the BBC or ITV to go, yeah, we'd love to do that, but I'm not sure there's even the scope for it in linear TV anymore. Yeah. Which then you're forced back into a paywall behind one of the streamers, or you're back into like YouTube or something like that. We've got one, maybe two generations that maybe don't know that much about the sport that may end up loving it if only they knew about it. And that's probably one of the major considerations that they're going to have to get over if the sport's to survive at that sort of top level, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, one thing that we did have, and you assume that it doesn't exist anymore, but it's daft to assume that, are the personalities. The personalities you have to develop via the product, and the personalities are certainly there. But you get so many British drivers who are sort of knocking on the door and, capable of producing the outstanding results. And you look at the back page of a newspaper and they never get a mention. And you get events like Monte Carlo. You got a desert in terms of motorsport in January. And you look back at the way the RAC was treated as a national event all those years ago. Monte Carlo was treated as an international event. I remember, with a transistor radio listening to Robin Richards on the Monte Carlo Rally and Raymond Baxter in 1958, 59 or whatever. And, it was part of the sporting scene.
Well, we did have the global sensation of Colin McRae and Richard Burns, which did bring the sport into that global arena for a time.
It did.
We just haven't really seemed to, it seemed to have waned away once he finished his career. We do need that. It would be interesting, I must admit, to see some of the current WRC drivers in a setting that doesn't have the same pressure as a championship, just so that we could really see those personalities like we did with Vatman and McRae back in the day.
Yeah.
I do wonder if the sport's just got too pressurized for us to really see people's true personalities. Thank you very much, Steve.
Drew, thanks, mate.